Now, this part of the lecture is to find a evidence of the Ice Age from the Bible. So we're going to have fun here. The Bible describes Noah's descendants. Do you see the cursor here? So a genealogical table of the descendants of Noah. Genesis 10 traces first the descendants of Japheth, then the descendants of Ham, and finally descendants of Shem. Here's a quiz. Who among these descendants of Noah built the Tower of Babel? Put it on the chat. So if you read the Bible, Ham's grandson, so Ham is here, right? Noah's son, Ham. Ham's grandson, Nimrod, according to the Bible, is a tyrant, a mighty hunter to be feared, and most significantly, a builder of cities. And Nimrod founds an empire based in Babylon. Here, do you see the cursor? Babylon. Here's another quiz now. Who among these descendants of Noah did found Egypt? Egyptian founder, who is it? Here, this could be maybe even trickier. Founder of the Egyptian state. So I have one answer, Mizraim. More? All right. So Mizraim. Okay, good. So Mizraim is a son of Ham and grandson of Noah. Mizraim is son of Ham and grandson of Noah, and who founded the Egyptian state. Interestingly, here, interestingly, the Arabic name for Egypt is Misura. There, do you see this on the bottom? The Arabic name for Egypt is Misura, as obvious trace of this name. Okay. All right. All the Ice Age people were descendants of Noah's three sons. Noah's three sons, and actually they were Ice Age, who already knew how to build ships, towers, and cities. Right? So if you believe the Bible, if you believe Noah's flood, and you believe that Noah's family exists really, then they really lived like 900 years, over 900 years, and they must have known all these things, right? Now, we would expect the people who scattered from Babel, right? Scattered from Babel to share many of the same technological skills so they could pass down technology to many generations. Now, remember that during the Ice Age, the expansion of ice sheets resulted in a sea level approximately 130 meters. So we model the thickness and areas of ice covered everything. Basically, it's gonna lower the sea level approximately 130 meters than today's sea level, exposing land that was otherwise underwater. This newly exposed ground granted entry into areas that were previously inaccessible. I mean, but this is the same as secular explanation. Only difference is, again, the magnitude and the timing. Now, did you know that soon after, now, as I explained in this slide, especially here, look at this left bottom here. So this Genesis 4:22 tells us that the pre-flood man knew how to craft and work with bronze and iron already. Tubal Cain, you remember? So they had all these technologies to build the ark, right? And Babel Tower and the pyramid here. So do you know that the soon after Tower of Babel, the ancient Minoans had designed and built structures with beams strategically located within the rock walls to absorb earthquake shock and to prevent collapse and structural damage. Did you know that in Sexay Human, ancient Peruvian displayed brilliant stone cutting capabilities here in their temples, walls, and the structures, all carried from a place 3 kilometers away, weighs on approximately 120 tons, right? How about the lost city of Pakistan on the left here? 4,000 years ago. It was one of the largest early urban settlements in the world. The city had a planned layout based on a street grid of buildings made of mortared brick and likely housed around 35,000 residents. There are a number of other examples, of course, including the building of pyramids, which were probably built based on the technology that was used to build the Tower of Babel. So you change the viewpoint and the biblical worldview. You can explain all these things, and they perfectly fit. You don't need to really worry about, and you don't need really PhD degrees and in different areas to figure out what happened in the past. Because according to the Bible, you believe it and you take the evidence and fit it. They fit perfectly almost in almost all areas. Okay, you have to just remove the prejudice based on uniformitarian, based on mainstream secular scientific understanding. Okay, but again, at the same time, I don't want you guys to just close your ears. I don't want to see. I don't want to hear. I just believe Bible, and I'm nervous if I'll be wrong if the scientific evidence presented. No, you have to seek for scientific evidence. Okay, you don't need to worry about after at the end of the day, scientific evidences will rebuke the Bible. No, it's not going to happen. Now, all these things perfectly make sense if there was one ice age during which people scattered around during the ice age. Okay. And actually, also to explain detail on this in another 2 hours during ice age, what time in earlier stage or later stage, and what happened in deglaciation period, and what happened to mammoths. I don't deal with those in this lecture series. That's a little too much. I mean, that alone need another 100 hours. So we are not going to do that, and I'm not capable of doing it. Anyway, so again, let me say again, all these things perfectly make sense if there was one ice age during which people scattered around the world through the exposed lands from the Tower of Babel. Some retained the knowledge and technology, while some others lost their knowledge as generations went by. So from the biblical perspective, there's no such chronological order as the Stone Age and Bronze Age. They might have existed at the same time in different regions. Okay? Depending on how smart or well-trained your ancestors were. Okay? Now, let's shift our attention to Job. Now, the fun part begins. This Job, the book of Job, will give us an ambiguous biblical evidence of the Ice Age again. Job 1:2 shows that Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Then after he went through the sufferings in Job 42:16, he says, after this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. This tells us that Job's lifespan could possibly be more than 200 years. You do calculation, that totally makes sense, okay? Which is consistent with the lifespan of patriarchs during the period here. See, over 200 years after Noah's flood and after Babel. As you can see from this graph, Job must have lived during the Ice Age. This is something also agreed by biblical scholars and biblical archaeologists. According to Job 1:1, Job lived in Uz. I'm not sure it's the right pronunciation, Uz. Here's a question. Where was Uz? Where was Uz in today's land? For example, Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Egypt, Jordan. Where? Put your answer in the chat. If you don't know, you can put don't know. But please put your answer. Okay, Israel or Jordan? I don't know. Good. I don't know. Good. Iraq. Good. Thank you, guys. All right. So let's find out. Uz is sometimes identified with the kingdom of Edom, roughly in the area of modern-day southwestern Jordan. According to Lamentations 4:21, right? It talks about this Edom and Uz here. Other locations proposed for Uz include more southern Arabia, Bashan in modern-day southern Syria, and Arabia east of Petra in Jordan. However, because Job 40:23 describes the Jordan River. It must not have been too far from the Jordan River. Now, so what I did was to check the average weather in this area, modern days. Okay, now, so this data is actually is from the year 2019, and as you can see, it is very hot, 90 in summer, and about 55 in winter, lowest temperature, right? And since the dry is the land is very dry and snow is uncommon. Right? It's just a desert. If you live in LA, it's like LA. This is a little hotter than LA, I think. Now, interestingly, the book of Job, contains hints that Job lived during the Ice Age. The book of Job has more references to ice than any other book of the Bible. The book of Job also has 5 references to snow, more than any other book of the Bible. This suggests that Job was very familiar with ice and snow. In other words, during the Ice Age, the climate in woods must have been very different from today. Are you familiar with the desert? Currently, about 33% of total land surface area of Earth is desert. Did you know that there is so many geological and archaeological evidence saying all of this current dry desert were once wet? All these yellow areas were wet, were not desert, were actually wetlands there at some distant past. It's a fact. It is a fact. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little more here. So we call them wet desert because they were wet before. Wet desert. Okay? So current desert were wet in before. So for example, geologists were astonished to find fossils of various amphibians, and hippopotami, and crocodile, fish, clams, and other aquatic organisms in the Sahara Desert. And you have this paper here. See? Oops. Paleoclimate evidence from an extinct river system in the southwestern Sahara, science. This is okay. So these confirm the desert was once a wet environment. The wet Sahara is one of the many climate mysteries surrounding the Ice Age, but the post-flood Ice Age can easily explain wet desert. So I'm going to easily explain this wet desert, okay? The Ice Age caused by Noah's flood, right after Noah's flood, starting about 200 years after finishing the flood, would have caused much more precipitation all over the earth, right? We talked about this in the earlier lecture here. Because of the greater evaporation from a wall motion, which I have already explained, right? So then how come they are dry desert now? Well, the creation theory is that at the end of the Ice Age, mainly during deglaciation period, great desiccation occurred, producing the deserts we observe today. Again, I don't have time to go in detail in this, but this is a later stage of Ice Age when deglaciation accelerates, and then this great desiccation everywhere is dry, especially in summer. That happens now. This desertification is ongoing event right now. I guess you guys all know also, which in our understanding is due to the natural phenomena following the one Ice Age, which happened 4,000 years ago. Again, the major difference in the understanding of the desertification between the uniformitarian and the creation is the time frame along with the magnitude of the event. Not only in the Sahara Desert, the Mojave Desert in America was also once a wetland with Great Lakes. There is geological evidence, clearly. Okay, here's another quiz now. Did Abraham live during the Ice Age? I guess it is hard to imagine that Abraham lived during the Ice Age, right? Yes or no? This question is yes or no. Did Abraham live during the Ice Age? Yes or no? You can see I don't. You can put I don't know if you don't know. That's tricky. But you put all yes here. Oh, I have no. Thank you. Be bored with your thought, okay? So don't worry about it. Good. I don't know. No. Yes. Good. No. Good. So let's find out. From Genesis 11, we know that the Abraham was born about 292 years after the global flood, according to the Bible. You just read it, and it's after 292 years, something like that, after the global flood. And he lived to an age of 175 years, right? So the Abraham lived at around peak of Ice Age, clearly. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Then there is a clue in the Bible about the Ice Age. I mean, any circumstance that shows Abraham was lived in the Ice Age, and let's find out. Another thing is, if that's true, if the Abraham lived in the Ice Age during the Ice Age, consequently the climate in the area would have been somewhat different from today also, as you also saw from the woods, right? So here another quiz. The area where Abraham lived is currently a desert, like this. Do you think during Abraham's generation the area was a wet desert? Answer is yes. All right. Now we see an example of this in the account of the separation of Lot's family from Abraham's. You know that, right? Lot chose to live in the valley of the Jordan near Sodom because it was well watered everywhere. However, as you know from also this picture here, today, this region is a total desert. It's a total desert. And there's more proof here from Genesis 14. Genesis 14, 3, 14, 3 and 8 and 10 describes the battle in the valley of Siddim, which is today's Salt Sea here, Dead Sea. Okay? This is the valley of Siddim. Here, Genesis 14:8 describes that the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, Bela drew up their battle lines in the valley of Siddim. Okay? Now think about it. Okay? Think about it. If the valley of Siddim were a desert like today, you don't have the drinking water there. Nothing. They couldn't have drawn their battle lines there unless they wanted their soldiers to die of thirst in the desert, right? Think about it. No drinking water there. That area at that time must not have been desert like today. Must not have been a desert like today. Now, let's turn our attention to the flooding due to snow melting. The flooding due to snow melting is very often covered in the media, also today, news media today in the US, especially in the spring season, where almost every spring, when snow and ice from mountain melt and rivers overflow. So this is just every year thing. How about woods during the Ice Age? While there were no glaciers in that area from the geological evidence, you can see the geological evidence whether or not glacier were there or not, and actually there was no. Okay, so no glacier there. However, we can still imagine that Job would have still experienced heavy snow in winter if he lived in during the Ice Age, and snow melting in spring, and dry hot weather in summer during the Ice Age in that area. Okay, so where are we going with this? Indeed, the book of Job describes the snow melting quite often. Job 6, 16, and 17 describes, when can you read the Job 6, 16, and 17?
When darkened by thawing ice and swollen with melting snow, but that ceased to flow in the dry season, and in the heat vanished from your channels.
Thank you. See? It describes thawing ice and melting snow, as well as the dry season and heat. Can you believe it? More interestingly, it talks about darkened water by thawing ice. So here's a quiz. How come can the water be darkened by ice? It has to be clear. Water has to be clear from the melting snow, right? How come the water be darkened by ice? Yeah, Soyoung, thank you. Yeah, you guys already know. So hint is that during the Ice Age, volcanic activities were common. All right, the biblical standpoint there. So the answer is the volcanic dust and clouds came down with snow during the Ice Age, since the volcanic activities would have been common during the peak of the period. Then what happened? The melting water becomes darkened. Incredible. This is incredible. Now, Job 9:30 and 24:19. When can you read this?
If I wash myself with snow water and make my hands never so clean, as heat and drought snatch away the melted snow.
Thank you. See, these verses also describe snow water and the melting snow. It talks about the melting in summer. So this is the summer season, or the spring season, right? Now, Job 37, 9, and 10 talks about the winter season. Could you read it also?
Job 37, 9 to 10. The cold from the driving winds, the breath of God produces ice, and the broad waters become frozen.
Broad waters become frozen, right? Like seawater become frozen. And it talks about the cold from driving winds. And this never happens nowadays in that area. Now, Job 38, 22, 29, and 30 also. When, please?
Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, from whose womb comes the ice, when the surface of the deep is frozen?
Thank you. See, these also talk about the winter season. It furthermore mentions that the surface of deep is frozen. Deep sea is frozen. This never happens today, right? This is not something that we see or experience in today's weather in Jordan or Israel area at all. Incredible. Furthermore, it appears that Job had heard about Noah's flood. Job 9:5 describes the movement of mountains here, and Job 38:8. When please, also read. Maybe you start from Job 9:5, 12, 15, and 38:8, please.
Okay. He moves mountains without their knowing it and overturns them in his anger. If he holds back the waters, there is drought. If he lets them loose, they devastate the land. Who shuts up the sea behind the doors when it bursts forth from the womb?
Thank you. Put your imagination here that Job heard about this Noah's flood, that water came out from the crust, right, and all this devastation of the lands and mountain moves, right? Mountains really literally move during Noah's flood. All these things, and if you take that standpoint, that this really perfectly fits. It's very interesting to see this. And the Job 38, 10, and 11 says, "I fixed the limit for it. This far you may come and no farther." So it appears that this implies the end of the flood Job is talking about. Finally, Job 12, 23 and 13, 1. When? Can you read this one more time?
Yes. He makes nations great and destroys them. He enlarges nations and disperses them. My eyes have seen all this. My ears have heard and understood it.
Okay. It seems to describe the separation at the Babel. Okay. So, Job lived during the Ice Age. The Ice Age began shortly after the flood and lasted for a few centuries. There was only one Ice Age, and it is written in the Bible. Okay, so we are done here today, and so we will have this Q&A session. But before then, the next lecture will be about race formed in 4,500 years. Right? We have different race, right? And does mitochondria point to Noah's time and modeling of biblical human population growth? So these are all related to this flood and ice age and mutation evolution, and talk about the human evolution a little bit. And then these orders could be changed. And then I'm going to have a guest lecture talk about most of this. So I'm going to teach human evolution part, and the guest lecturer will talk about the rest. Okay, that's next time. Okay, so this is it, and let's have a Q&A session here, so you can unmute and ask.